Do you want to hear a fun fact that I heard recently?
Go on.
So the distance of the Great Wall of China is 3 times longer than the distance of London to Beijing.
Right. Well, it sounds false.
Well, it's not false.
Yeah, well, I trust you, but it sounds false.
That is bonkers if you think about it. Like I think it's about 7,500 kilometers is the distance from London to Beijing, and then the Great Wall of China is like 21,000 kilometers.
All those warped maps.
Yeah. Well, it's like a wavy zigzag thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
so not zigzag, but yeah.
On the topic of China, did you see that US finally changed the shipping policies for Temu and Shein?
Yeah.
So they took away the thing where they were basically getting paid to ship products into the market. It's really interesting.
Yeah, that's mad. Yeah, it was something that was always, I felt like it should have probably happened
just like
a long time ago.
Destroying their own businesses by funding China's competition, which is pretty wild.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, we obviously went to Saw With Us hosted a Triple Well D2C agency dinner last week. How did you find it?
It was good, yeah. You've got written down here what were our most interesting conversations.
Yeah.
And for me, it was definitely hearing all the positive feedback about the podcast, a real positive
drop that in
real
there.
Positive ego boost.
It really was. Yeah.
That people enjoy our utter waffle on these podcast episodes.
Just pure value is what I heard. Just ringing around the room.
People going to extreme lengths to make sure they could listen to us in high quality audio.
Yeah.
So great to hear.
Yeah, but I mean, on that, just like what were maybe some of your biggest takeaways from the evening, or interesting conversations with you that you had with specific founders?
I think biggest takeaways were, my overall biggest takeaway was the appetite for those sort of things. Like we've done 2 now. We did that one, and then I also did like a sort of a smaller boutique one with Conversion Wise, where we got sort of 15 to 16 people in the room, where that one was a little bit more focused on even bigger brands, so people doing over 10 million a year, 5 million a year, I think was the lowest actually. And both of them came away with everybody really loved this format, like keeping it, we keep it quite casual, like we do a little bit of value talk, but it's very much like not too much structure, but there seems to just be a massive appetite for events, like smaller events, more curated events in the UK.
I was going to say, that's the big thing. I think we're so far behind like the US and that's been such a big driver there for so long. But I just think, like you say, there's a real lack of it here.
I think it's, and I find them so valuable. Like, well, I've kind of, I don't know about you, but I used to do a lot more like in-person stuff, as I feel like I don't really anymore, not as much. So trying to make a bit more of a conscious effort going into it, doing more of it next year. I think from a business perspective, it's a great way for us to drive like demand for what we do, because it's easier to talk to someone and sort of help them understand and fix the problem in person versus like on a call. But I also think you get a lot of the big value from those things actually comes from like just the off the cuff conversations that you have with people, and just like people sharing shared experiences, or like talking through things that you're currently going through that they've been through previously, and giving you these like little nuggets that can change the way you think about something.
Yeah, it's just a great way to build those relationships as well, like aside from anything else.
Yeah.
I had some great conversations. I mean, it was funny. We were doing, obviously, myself, Ollie, and Connor were doing a bit of a panel at the start, and thanks, you just kind of threw me into that. Ollie comes up to me when I arrive, and he's like, "Oh, by the way, do you mind hosting this panel?" I just had no idea.
You don't want preparation. You don't need preparation because it makes it feel too forced.
Yeah, that's true.
That went well.
Yeah, that was really good.
I also tactically sat you next to Daniel from Pure Sport, because I'd spoken to him like 2 weeks before, and he was just, creative strategy was just the topic that we talked about most. Like he's focusing a lot on new customer acquisition, and I kind of was explaining how we approach it, and I just was like, "Yeah, you want me to sit next to?"
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, because we were just chewing each other's ears off the whole night. But it was great. He's a really interesting guy, just so passionate, so much energy. But yeah, obviously Pure Sport, which are like a supplement based D2C brand that really position themselves around running.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty mad, like the scale they've got to without without acquisition being a big driver of their strategy.
Yeah, paid acquisition. I was saying that to him when I met him. I was like, "You've grown this brand the hard way." Like,
Yeah. No
like
one does it that way round.
no, like the way for context for anyone who doesn't know who they are, primarily probably they're very UK focused. So like they're a supplement brand, but they're built primarily through community. So primarily through run clubs, in-person events. They have quite a so they started the run clubs. They've kind of built organically over time. You said they started just doing it on a lunchtime with people who worked in the office, and then it's grown to like thousands of people a week going, and that's also sort of grown this secondary like or vertical within the business of apparel. Like everybody loves buying
Yeah.
the socks, the
Yeah,
Pure
they
Sport
just
Run
they do
Club
these
stuff.
drops, don't they? And they just
Yeah,
sell out. But yeah, it's like what was so interesting is just his obsession with brand. Because I know one thing we were kind of saying as part of that panel was like, you can't have brand before you have the sales almost, or like it's much harder to do it that way round. And people almost neglect the actual scalability of their business because they're really prioritizing brand over performance. But I think what was really interesting is, and it's so rare to see it this way around, is the real focus they had on building community through these run clubs. They've got like 50, I forgot what they call them, but almost like the leads of each of the run clubs that they have for Pure Sport, that almost have this big community group chat on WhatsApp, and they're almost like the super fans in a sense, and they are doing it completely free of charge, and they're just kind of hosting these run clubs for Pure Sport, and it's just been a big driver, especially as almost they've caught this wave during a time of how just almost the growth of run clubs as an idea.
yeah. I think they were a big driving force behind that. To be honest, like them, there's a couple of other brands that do offline really well. Um, But yeah, they've been a real pioneer of that, and now he's obviously putting a lot more focus on, like, paid acquisition. I
Yeah,
think it's like it sets a really good foundation because they obviously that community is such a good feedback loop. Gives them such a clear understanding of who the customer is and what they stand for and what they want to be. But yeah, super interesting way to grow a business. I think that community piece is just it's such an evolving, like desiring customers almost. I feel people really crave offline, like in-person connections, and brands are starting to utilize that far more.
yeah. They've really tapped into like collaborations as well with other brands, haven't they?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think there's more of that as
Did they
well.
do something with Represent?
Did it with the founder represent. Yeah, they did a electrolyte stick. I think that's also something I think brands don't do enough of. Is
Yeah,
cross pollination. I spoke to. It's interesting because I think for a lot of brands that have gone the other way and they're very like performance driven, they're very like focused on CAC first, like new customer efficiency as a core KPI for like all of their activity, all of the marketing spend, most of the marketing spend. I think it can be quite difficult to like sort of commit to doing brand due to the measurement piece of it.
mm,
Like it's certainly for us, like a Jack Group, like something that I'm thinking about going into next year is like, how do you commit to doing something that's impossible to measure? Like you can't attribute a run club. Like
yeah,
you want to attribute everything. Like if you come from like a digital marketing, paid advertising background, you want to be able to get like data and clarity on what you do.
yeah,
So it's like, how do you like come to terms with that? How do you commit to it? And how do you do it consistently? Because I think there's a temptation to just do it, spend 20 grand on a big offline activation and then shit your pants and not do it again.
yeah. I think it's almost like you've got to build it into your strategy in a way that you're not expecting anything off the back of
So,
it.
so I had a really good conversation with another founder who does a lot of this in the UK. And he puts it through as an OPEX. So
Yeah,
at the start of the year, he just assigns an OPEX percentage of like,
it's a
I'm going to
great idea.
spend X. He didn't tell me the percentage, but he's saying 2%. 2% of your balance sheet OpEx is just going to go through as this expense, and you just like you almost treat it as a necessity to
Mm,
building something.
yeah,
It's like I can only build this business if I have this fixed overhead that is brand building activity, which I think is a really interesting way of like almost lowering the burden of spending that money, because you just like, oh, I'm not even going to try and measure it. I'm just going to do it, and it's going
Yeah.
to produce a halo effect.
Yeah, it's so interesting because it's almost like you say, it's almost like you're positioning it as like an office space.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah,
like for
absolutely.
our agency, a creative agency, we spend almost 10 grand a month. Well, more than that now, we've got Manchester, but on offices.
Yeah,
And it's like, you can't really measure, okay, what is going to be more impactful, make us more creative? Is it going to be working together in an office or working remotely?
yeah,
You can't measure that. So like you say, you just put it down as a fixed cost almost.
yeah. And it's almost like, one, you can't. It's also removes the burden of even trying to measure it, which I think
Mm.
can be quite a big like distraction in itself. Like QR coding, like surveying people. It's like, I just thought it was a really interesting way of lowering that like mental burden of it.
Yeah. There was a Love Island star that crashed
Oh yeah,
the party,
you might be listening.
which was interesting. Obviously, we won't go into too many details there, but it was quite funny how there's a Love Island star that is starting a brand, and obviously, it was you had to kind of apply to come to the dinner, and put some more details to vet yourself as a founder and where your business is up to, and they hadn't done this and then had
Just
just
turn
turned
up.
up on the
Just
day.
present. I actually really rate the hustle to
I
do that.
know, I
Like, I do.
do.
It just presents
Yeah.
it presents some issues of me not eating dinner because I had to give up my seat at the table.
Did you not eat dinner?
No, I didn't have any food.
Oh,
I think
no.
the the other funny thing at the event was telling the story about during the panel, kind of giving an example of a filter shower head
Oh,
brand, and
God, yeah,
then
that was funny.
turns out the founder was just in the room and you were
Yeah.
using
So
his brand as the example.
the founder of Hello Clean, and at the time I didn't know this was the founder of Hello Clean, his name's Omar. He asked a question around, what was it, around kind of how you position your creative at different stages of the funnel.
Yeah, he was talking about YouTube, like considering moving multi-platform or more upper funnel on Meta.
Yeah.
And we were kind of talking through how a lot of the time there's like Meta, when you start spending on those channels, for 95% of brands, regardless of how well you execute, they're still going to produce worse results than spending more money on Meta if you can make it happen. So we were talking through like our approach to sort of moving up the funnel with creative on Meta using
Yeah.
conversion campaigns.
Yeah, and we were saying it in a way like, depending on what your brand is, like if you've got a product that people aren't aware of what the actual problem is. So I use the example of filtered shower head because it's true. I did it. I didn't. Into my skincare to some degree.
I've just got his shower head. I
You
hope everybody
have.
can tell.
I need to get one. I need to get one. But yeah, obviously, unfiltered water, hard water can damage your skin, damage your hair. And I was basically giving this as an example that you have to go higher up in the performance funnel to educate people on that. And then he was like, "Well, that's great because my product is a filtered shower head."
Funny. It's such an interesting product because it's so topical. Like there's also like news articles you can leverage about like when you had to boil tap water in London for a bit.
Yeah.
Then there's like us versus them. People spend loads of money on the skincare, but then it's actually the water. It's such a perfect product.
But I think like they were pretty early in there. Were they on Dragon's Den as well? Did he go on Dragon's Den?
I'm not sure.
It was either him or one of his competitors. Yeah, we need a fact checker in the room. But yeah, but at that stage, I think that was probably 5 years ago. Like it was such an unknown where it was kind of what we were talking about. You almost have those brands that are the innovators and they have to invest that capital into the education piece until it becomes, known to the masses in many ways. Like, especially now with all of the news discussions around how bad unfiltered water is from a drinking perspective for your skin, your hair. Like it's almost now caught at that right moment.
Yeah, he did go on Dragon's Den. They went on about a year ago. You should know that. You watch Dragon's Den religiously at lunchtime.
Yeah, so I've moved to Shark Tank now because I've made my way
Bigger
through all
numbers.
the Dragon's Den. Yeah, it's actually mad. Like the numbers are way bigger.
Yeah, it's like
Dragon's Den. You're going in like, okay,
15% for 50 grand.
Yeah, 50. Yeah, exactly. 15% for 50 grand. It's like Shark Tank, 5% for $800,000. It's like just the levels.
So yeah, really, really. To wrap that up, I think really, really positive event. Um, we've already got one more, so we're going to keep doing the ones with conversion wise, then we're going to keep doing the ones with triple whale. So I think we've got another one with conversion wise already in the works for January. So look out for that. And then no doubt we'll have another one for triple whale in kind of Q1. I think it's hard to do events in Q4 because people are just
Yeah,
running around like lunatics. So
yeah.
yeah, excited to keep them going.
Yeah, should be good. Yeah, really excited for the next one. Cool. Some current affairs then. Yeah, saw this article that Chipotle are planning this like massive digital scavenger hunt where they're going to be giving out up to $1 million worth of quesadillas. I think it's for National Quesadilla Day. I mean, who sets these days, by the
I
way?
don't
Do you know
know.
what I
There's a
mean?
day for
Like,
everything these days. There's
I just don't
literally.
get who is the person that sets the days. But yeah, I think I found this really interesting. The way that they're doing it is they're utilizing several influencers within the space who are almost going to be putting up these codes. It's very subtly in their videos, and also they're going to be doing it through their own Chipotle, obviously social channels as well, where they're going to be putting these codes up subtly to be used and almost creating this like digital scavenger hunt. So some of those influencers that they'll be tapping into are like mukbang
Yeah,
creators, the people that obviously just eat content,
such a niche. There's a
eat.
niche for everything.
Yeah. And I don't know, I just found this really interesting because it's not something I've seen loads of being done before from a digital perspective. I've seen obviously a lot of physical treasure hunt based activations, but yeah, what are your thoughts?
I think gamification, isn't it? Just continuing down that trend of gamification. I think I've seen a couple of like content series around treasure hunts. I think Sanucci have done it a few times. And then the one that comes to mind for me is Gymshark did one around last Black Friday where they hid, think it was £500 codes around the website, and people had to find them. And if they found the code, they had to click on it. And then I think it was a pop up, and then they got £500 free
Interesting.
items. Um, yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think it's very shareable. I think it gets people like excited. It gets people tuned into content. I'm sure the influencers all got like better watch time on their
Yeah.
creative as people were trying to find them and stuff like that. Um, just interesting, isn't it? Just doing something different, which I think is is a lot of the challenge for big brands anyway.
Yeah, I think that's the difficulty, isn't it? It's like how do you innovate and cut through the noise, especially during, intense offer periods like Black Friday. I think it definitely got me thinking.
Different. There's like seen a lot more brands do sort of um like like giveaways a lot, like lead so run lead gen through Q3, but like a lot of it'll be around like giving away a big prize for people who purchase.
Mm,
Ridge Wallet are currently giving away like a gold plated Tesla Cybertruck, I think, which is pretty wild. And then another one of our clients is also giving away a car. It's like everybody that they've given it, that can be quite tangible and really can have a big impact on CAC and bringing the
yeah,
efficiency down.
I'd be interested to know how that like affects LTV
Yeah, I don't know. I've never
because
been close enough to one of those activations to know. But sort of pairing up those competition websites that you see or use
yeah,
that they were a massive like wave, weren't they?
yeah,
Like
7
buy tickets to enter.
performance or something. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
buying tickets to enter a raffle for like a car, and it's kind of like doing that but with a product.
yeah, we worked with a brand once, probably like near the start of the agency 4 or 5 years ago now, and they were doing that, and they were these Irish guys, like proper cowboys, and I was just like, "This doesn't feel right," and
Yeah,
I think it turned out that they were actually, stealing the cars and selling them on.
Christ.
Yeah, but yeah, that was a huge thing. I mean, there's lots of legalities around that, but yeah, I guess my only concern with doing those massive giveaways is, you know, what what is the quality of the
Yeah,
customer
yeah.
that you're bringing in?
Are you just pulling forward demand? Like, would those people have just bought anyway without
Mm,
that? Like, again, I've heard anecdotally that they work really well.
yeah,
I think it would be there's probably ways to do it for your brand that is very aligned with your customer base.
mm.
Um, but yeah, really interesting.
Have you seen that Google AI Studio? Have you used it?
I haven't, no.
It's pretty nuts. I've been experimenting with it, and you can literally pull a video creative into it and say, "This was one of our top performers. Um, please break down the nuances that made this a top performer," and it will literally analyze the image, the video, and also what is being said within the creative, and it will give you a full breakdown as to why I think it was about a top performer, and it's pretty accurate. It's I think this is interesting and where the direction that we're going now, where it's almost like suddenly for the first time, it's like, that whole how you can actually use AI to optimize strategy, and areas of obviously creative as well. And I know that Motion are also coming out with some interesting tools that are similar to this as to like how it can actually take your top performers that are already within the Motion database and analyze what that was they did well, and then how you could then either repurpose or execute a similar style of creative.
Yeah, that I think, like, that whole, like, AI creative iteration, using it in the creative process is, like, start like, it's an in I've been thinking about it a lot in terms of, like, do we do something? Do we have the vantage point to do it? But then I also come back to, like, the foundation for that is, like, really strong data warehousing of, like, like, the data you have available to layer up to, like, training a model. It's like Motion surely have that coming. Like, they must have
Oh,
such a
they do.
massive data
I was at that
warehouse of,
Motion
like
Summit last week, and they've got 4 really big AI layers that they're bringing into the platform,
just, like
which just makes complete sense.
yeah, and that's then it comes to my then when I'm thinking about it is it's like, are we ever gonna be able to supersede what they're like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, can you catch that? It's like for me, I always it's like the people who win in AI and like in verticals see it makes sense for it to be the people who have the most availability of data, like
Yeah,
the one that has the
exactly.
most data points to build models off, which obviously Facebook is the king for us. Like, it's hard, no one's going to be able to outcompete Meta unless you do it specialized, maybe.
Mm.
But yeah, I've not looked at Google AI. I've not had a chance to look through Motion, but I've been playing around with Cursor. Have you seen that as well? Which
No.
is like a development tool. Basically, it's like a you can build apps from prompts, so you don't need to learn to develop. You can just like, and there's another one that I was Replit. There's two of them, and you can just like prompt it to build stuff, and it just like develops it
What, almost like a visual, like an image creation tool?
like full tech apps. So like,
Oh, mad.
you could build like a calendar app from a few prompts. You can build like a productivity app from a few prompts, which is
Yeah,
just showing
God.
again like how the role I was talking to a friend about how a role of like developers are going to change from being like executional to like reviewing code and fine tuning models. It's just
Yeah.
so interesting.
Yeah, it is crazy, like, that Gord Gaddett, who he was
Stephen
like the
Bartlett
CTO of Google, I think it was Google
went
for
to Flight Story, didn't not
yeah,
Flight Story. Is that it?
he's got a really famous book called Solve for Happy, so he's almost built an equation for happiness because his son died, when I think his son died in his teens, and I think he'd quit his role in Google as CTO, and yeah, that was it. So he was chief business officer for Google X, and then also CTO at Google X. And then obviously had quit that once he kind of realized, okay, I need to find the formula for happiness because it's not from the
Yeah,
work that you do, etc. But he's done a massive piece on AI, and I remember just like a quote that really interested me, just about like the law of accelerated returns. And I think he was basically saying by 2030, AI will be smarter than the smartest human on earth. Um, by 2040, AI will be 1 billion times smarter than the smartest human on earth,
yeah,
which is the equivalent of Albert Einstein to a fly.
it's scary over long time horizons. I would love to see though a like there's so many AI creative tools. I would love to see a percentage score of how many winning ads they put out because I bet it's absolutely tiny.
No, it is.
They're terrible at the
They're
moment.
not good at this point. Like I've experimented with the UGC creator ones. So
Yeah,
creators will license their face, so you can then actually you give it a script, and then it will basically create this script. I mean, there's elements of how ethical that is
yeah, yeah.
anyway, but you know it's difficult to get that working in a way that actually drives that authenticity, which I know is becoming more and more important with ad creative.
Yeah, I wonder how platforms are gonna deal with it. Like, is Meta just gonna allow you to
There's
do
got to
that?
be
I
legislation.
feel like some sort of advertising authority will make you either label it or just not allow you to do it.
Yeah. You like
Because
you
it
have
just
to, because you can't be having someone that's licensed their face making a claim that is false.
but then yeah, that's the thing. It's like we've not if you think about like D2C advertising on Meta, it still is somewhat the Wild West in terms of what you can get away with in comparison to like TV, where you have to go through like a million checks and balances to get the message and the creative
Yeah.
on platform. And there's never really been like a massive review of that. Like they enforce it, but they enforce it on a very like one by one, case by case
Yeah.
basis. I wonder if like AI creative will be a point at which like they put some more significant changes in place, because you could get to a situation where like you could pretty much like you could be running so much iterative create like it just becomes like infinite, the approaches that you could take to that
Yeah,
creative
I
output.
mean, I mean, just think of like these grey hat marketers, like what, especially drop shippers, how they're
Yeah,
probably
just be able to.
utilizing AI. Like it must be rinsing it. I mean, even just down to things that, from a brand perspective, you just would never get away with. Like, for instance, I saw this story about a shipper who is doing like 5 mil a month from those sunrise lights that just is like
Yeah,
it's like a light that just kind of has become massive in the world of drop shipping and TikTok shop, and they're doing crazy numbers. But they said like their whole strategy, they're literally taking their best performers and rerunning them with the latest trending sounds at that time. But like you
interesting.
can't use, in terms of from a guidelines perspective, you can't use trending sounds most of the time
Yeah,
because they are copyright.
I've got I've seen a few. We've actually just seen this with our so TikTok shop Liquid London did some huge numbers on there, and I was looking through the TikTok have just released a thing where you don't have to ask for Spark codes to run affiliate ads anymore. So we got access to like 2,000 bits of creative overnight that we hadn't touched, which was wild. And I was just scrolling through it on at the weekend, and there was so many where some it must have been, I don't know, people obviously trying to make like quick cash online with taking top performers and overlaying text on it, but they were doing it to like there was probably 500 of them, like 500 of the previous top videos had just been taken, and they'd overlaid like 5 or 6 variations of the text and posted them to a different account. That's
Yeah,
probably the
mad.
same, like, it's
Yeah.
just trying to, like, grey hat your way through the algorithm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know someone that does that with organic as well, but they'll literally post the same 5 video. They've got like a cycle, so it's like every 3 months they'll repost the same 5 videos, but just with 5 different hooks again. So it's almost like taking, I mean, that with that, it's like you're literally just taking the theory of paid and applying it to organic,
Yeah, yeah,
which makes
interesting.
sense. Speaking of like AI and creative, I think it'd be interesting for us to talk about Obvi, which is a kind of female supplement brand, that have kind of fat burners and products that are kind of that are directed towards middle-aged women. Would you say
Yeah,
more so?
more like, probably like 30 plus if I
Yeah.
was to guess at a demo.
But so we've been working with Obvi for quite a few months now. Ash, the founder, he's a really interesting guy, and obviously, got quite an interesting way of running his creative that I've not really seen before, like using cost caps. I don't know if you've seen much of that.
And it's a big thing on Twitter, the argument of cost cap
Yeah,
versus no cost cap. I think both can work. I
yeah,
think there's different approaches to it.
yeah.
Um,
But he's like a massive advocate there. But I think so we've been working with him on performance creative for a while, and our we're doing predominantly statics with him. And we've kind of centered the strategy around using obscure AI imagery. Because one thing that when we were in the research phase, we realized that it's very, very difficult to, obviously, you've got to be really careful from a guidelines perspective to be showing before and afters of
Yeah.
people slim, well, overweight to slim. You've got to be really careful about how you visualize that. And then they've got a whole thing about Ozempic and how, it's the natural alternative to Ozempic. So it became very, very difficult, like how you then visualize this into actual creative. And this is where I think you can really use AI to your advantage. And the first ad that we did for them which absolutely popped. I think it was one of the first ones that we ever ran, and it took about 60% of ad account spend within the first 7 days, which based on the volume that they're doing is pretty nuts. Um, and it was I remember Molly and I, who's our art director, we were just sat down and we were talking about, okay, how can we like visualize this like before and after, before using Obvi and after, because even through AI, we were struggling to like generate people that were overweight and things
Yeah.
like that through the prompts. And the way that we were able to do that was like, and it's funny because I've seen this concept be ripped so many times now by other
The
brands.
strawberry.
Yeah, the strawberry. So it was like an overweight moldy strawberry on the left, so before Obvi, and then in the after Obvi, it was like this slim, happy, happy-go-lucky strawberry. um, but I think why this works so well is because there's just a complete contrast of that before and after. And by visualizing it in such an obscure way, it really helps cut through the noise. I think also like it just shows that it's not just about the visual or the prompt that you use to generate the actual image itself, but then how when you take that and download that, how you then utilize that as part of the creative. So like the before of one thing we've learned about doing these kind of before and after statics is you really need to show like a vast contrast from a saturation perspective with the before and after to really heighten that. So the before is black, the after is like this pink, vibrant color as the background. We've also done this in other ways for them. So there's one ad that we did, which the headline was just "fuck Ozempic," which was the best performer. Um, and then again, it's like a us versus them in a sense, but a modern way of doing that. So the Ozempic one is someone that's really slim; they look almost ill. And then the Obvi, there's a woman that's looking much happier, vibrant, healthy in many ways, and that again was utilizing AI. So it's almost like how can you almost visually represent or symbolize your message through using things
Yeah.
like AI, and whether it be objects, whether it be fruits or actual kind of people. I think it's definitely something that we've driven as part of that strategy.
I think it's also I think the key one of the things I don't see people do enough with, like, us versus them is, like, really, really over exaggerate the 2. Like, you need to make the contrast needs to be the more extreme you can make the contrast, the
Yeah.
better. I think these all do that really well. I'll have to put them on screen so everyone can
Yeah,
see
we'll
on the
definitely
YouTube.
put some of these on the screen.
But yeah, they've been going performing super well. And yeah, like you say, it seems to be ripped across all of those buy you a static package
Yeah,
places.
yeah. Oh, that pisses me off. So many of these companies now are like popping up that basically will sell templated statics, that they'll take your static
Yeah.
from ads library or whatever. They'll pull it into, they'll basically recreate it in Canva. So it's like an editable doc. And I've got nothing wrong with inspiration. I've even got nothing wrong with ripping ads in many ways, unless it's obviously a complete carbon copy. But I think actually taking a design and
Selling it.
selling it, even if it was part of a giveaway as like a swipe file, was very different. But selling something like that and profiting off someone else's work, I think is jarring.
Yeah, it
But
is.
it's a good sign, I guess.
Yeah.
The more ads you see getting ripped, it shows you're doing something right.
Um, I think it's interesting that Obvi are so heavily. I know we're starting to try and do some video for them now, starting to try and like take some spend away from statics, but they're just Ash has said multiple times on his podcast or on YouTube that he's just so all statics his ad account, which is
Yeah,
really interesting, very different to the majority of accounts you see nowadays, where they're very, very very, very video focused. So we'll have to see how that goes
Yeah.
as we start to kind of drive them.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like their whole creative strategy is centered around statics.
It's a very
And
bold claim niche, isn't it?
yeah,
Which I think helps.
yeah, exactly, exactly. I definitely think there's a lot of opportunity from a UGC and high prod perspective with the product, though. I think they that's what I'm kind of wanting to work with them on, like how we can introduce that and really give it a push. Because I know it hasn't worked for them previously, but I do think there's opportunities there.
Yeah.
Um, cool. The other creative that I just wanted to tap into and touch on is because it's a framework that we're seeing loads of success with now across a few accounts. It is a creative we did for the Essence Vault actually, which is that it's basically a high production ASMR concept. So we
Yeah.
spoke about this briefly before, but almost like the idea of how can we take these well known concepts that you would usually see in like a low prod setting and apply them to high production. It almost revamps it and brings it to life. So this came off an insight of a UGC best performer for Tev, which was ASMR. So we just thought, how we bring this into the studio in a high prod setting and push the boundaries.
Yeah, we had an ASMR unboxing from a creator that was working really well for like 8 months. I think it started to fatigue now actually, but it's interesting. I was actually talking to our new head of growth yesterday about Jack about kind of we were going through all of our historic high production shoots because we'd worked on like using Hamby obviously like we were until about halfway through last year just completely UGC and statics, and we were like, well, let's try and bring some high prod in. We were seeing how it was working for other businesses in the agency, and we kind of approached it probably in hindsight the wrong way round. Like we tried to go in with big swings and changing the format
Mm,
through my direction. I was like, let's do high prod, let's take some big swings. So we were trying to do things vastly different to what was working.
yeah.
Whereas I feel we've now sort of flipped the script, and the high prods that we've found to work are like the ASMR. We've also got this really satisfying one where it's like wax dribbling down the bottle, which Savannah.
Yeah, that is this one.
Oh, is that this one?
Yeah,
Oh, well,
yeah,
we've
yeah.
got another.
That's we've
Very
done the
similar,
two
aren't they?
together.
Okay.
There's a almost ASMR as part of this creative.
Yeah, I saw a really well-known American creative strategist tried to claim that their creative strategist had come up with this concept and just ripped our ad
That
completely,
really annoyed me. And
which
then
is really yeah.
Connor, the founder of the Essence Vault, holds no prisoners.
Just
Yeah, he basically called them out on
went for
Twitter
the
for it.
throat.
Yeah, literally, just straight chop.
Um, yeah, so this has worked really well. We've had a few like that now. I think the two formats that and we've also been brought out a new SKU, the electric diffuser, which we've kind of been crushing on. That's been crushing through high production.
We did the exact same framework for
Yeah,
that
yeah,
one, and it did well. And I think the learning here is like Ollie said, when we started, if from an ad account perspective, you've never run high prod before, we just came in, we bulldozed in with all these massive wild cards, big swing creatives. Whereas almost like, how can you take the learnings or the frameworks from your
yeah,
UGCs and apply them to high prod? So from obviously, how polished it looks, it's much better. However, it's not. There's not a huge difference there because I mean, I know we've experienced issues in the past with ad accounts where like the spend will not get put towards the high
yeah,
production
yeah,
assets if they've never seen them in the ad account before.
yeah. I think yeah, it's that whole leaning further into the creative, doing the targeting and segmenting it out, and that's a big issue. We have a proportion of our clients that work with just Hamby and not Saw, and then we've and one thing is we're trying to the idea of Hamby and Saw being separate, we're going to be changing into next year. But a big thing on the accounts where we've done a lot of these audits where we'll then take a look in maybe an account's come onto Hamby a couple of months in and we're not seeing the results we wanted to, and we will take a look in the account from a media buying perspective. It's just because they're not giving the assets spend to learn, not only to drive CAC, but also to learn. Like I think it's a process of learning from those creative testing, learning what like messaging frameworks work, what type of creatives work, what frameworks work, and there's been 3 accounts in the last 2 months where we've taken that over, and we've done that, and literally one yesterday that I sent to you,
Mm,
a nutrition, like, drinks brand, where it's just been transformational just to actually allocate some spend into these different diverse creatives,
yeah,
and it's dropped CAC by, like, 50% over 3 weeks. 'Cause not n firstly, just through testing different things, but secondly, we're now able to use the learnings through from what did and didn't work for the next batch, and it's just gonna get better and better and better.
that's why that synergy between the creative team and the performance team is just so important.
Yeah, I think it's just it's a different way, like, there's so many different ways to test creative, and I think it changes as you get bigger, like, because you and progress, but I think for most brands between, like, 5 and 20 mil, like, learning more about what works and what doesn't work, it should be a part of that, and a bit of segmentation should be a part of that.
Yeah,
But yeah, we broke this out for Tev, and it found it worked, and then we found it taking more and more spend.
yeah. Yeah, and I think the reason why this works so well is because, like I said, we're taking those learnings from an ASMR UGC video that was a best performer. We added in a hook that was like, "I just found out." So it's almost like this the secret.
Yeah,
I just find out the secret, and it's all as well. I think what makes it so interesting is that we're talking about like the amount of fragrance oil that is actually in fragrances. So I've seen so much success when we actually create industry friction or
yeah,
competitor friction within the creatives. Um, I know this is something one of our clients supply do a lot with as well, just in terms of like the mainstream razor companies and
yeah,
things like that, and really almost creating that controversy really helps drive that. I also just think like when you're really being conscious of like those adjectives that you're using in the creative, so like using the word secret, but then how you then deliver that line. So we did it in a way where the whole narrative, the whole narration throughout the creative is like as a whisper,
yeah,
which I think kind of really heightens this idea of like curiosity as well within that. And then we've layered and paired that on top with the satisfying visuals of the gloop going on the bottle, the ASMR of like tapping pound
yeah,
coins on the bottle, um to really help re-engage the audience throughout the creative. And then I think what's key here, and something that I see an issue with a lot of the time, is like, you have probably eight different things from with Tev that you could say is a USP, but we very specifically picked just three USPs to use in this. And then we got onto the backing, which was PR, social proof, the amount of bottles sold. So it almost became a product, we're driving that product aware element towards the back of the creative
yeah,
when it started off as more of a problem aware asset.
yeah. I think it's just it's the intention. Like, again, it's using the a lot of those learnings we pulled from UGC and pulled it to the high prod, and I think high production. I'm seeing more and more of it work. I'm seeing it as a macro trend. And I think the four like frameworks that I've seen work a lot is podcast. Like, we're doing so much volume at Jack through
Yeah.
podcast, and so have quite a few of our clients. Founder's story, which we've touched on before, but that can work, that can't work. You could pair those first two together as well, founder's story and podcast. I think satisfying videos and which ASMR falls into. I've forgotten what the fourth one was going to be.
In public interviews,
In public interviews, I get
but
it's kind of
they're hit
mid.
and
It's kind of
miss.
mid prod as well, isn't it? Because you can sometimes film on an iPhone.
Yeah, true.
Um, Forgotten. I've forgotten. Testimonials. I was going to say high
Yeah.
production testimonials. Like, take because that just work, especially for brands like supplement skincare. Like, just
Yeah,
bringing
yeah,
people
yeah.
into the
That was the
studio
unlock for
and
47
just
Skin
leveling that
alongside.
experience up.
Yeah.
It just builds more trust, I think,
I think
for
a
brands.
great way to do, if you want to merge that podcast and testimonial, you kind of said it from a founder story perspective, but like with 47 Skin, we had a best performer that was um like with a brand like 47 Skin, because they're all about authenticity and it's like real people, real results. A lot of the time podcast concepts can come across almost staged or forced or
Yeah,
badly acted. So they didn't really want to lean into that, which is understandable. So the way that we got around that was actually bringing in a real customer having a host and then almost
Just
having a
interviewing, yeah.
conversation, like an interview that feels like a really organic, natural podcast, and it actually is a real customer on a podcast. So I think that's an interesting approach as well.
I think you can do, yeah. I think that I've seen a few of those. I think also split. A lot of people are split screening. That's another one. Like
Yeah,
top of the screen or bottom of the screen is the podcast. The other half of the screen is like something like either UGC or production manufacturing videos that matches the narrative of the actual podcast.
yeah.
It sort of brings it to life even more.
I think with that, it's like you want to jump in and out of the split screen,
Mm,
because I think I love using, and I say this to my edit team, like split screens are great to bring in almost as like rehooks, because I think you need to be thinking almost in 5 second chunks of like, how can I, coming into this next 5 seconds, how can I make sure to re-engage the
yeah,
audience to drive that hold rate? And split screens is a great way to do that, almost to just make sure that, yeah, that you're re-engaging the audience.
yeah.
Cool. Is that the
Should we
pod?
wrap up? Yeah. I think we've obviously just talked a lot about creative statics for Obvi. If people want to give people a bit of information about our Black Friday statics package,
Yeah.
probably not much time to jump on it if
Yeah,
you
yeah,
are,
yeah.
but
Well, that I guess just another reminder of like Saw and Hamby have over the last 3 months developed the most comprehensive Black Friday guide on the market across performance and creative. It's completely free of charge. Probably 150 plus resources in there. It's all within Notion, loads of plug and play templates, and all of our data basically that we've built over the last few years around in and around Black Friday. So we'll put those links below again. Obviously, subscribe if you're on YouTube. Give it us a 5-star on Spotify, and we are running a Black Friday statics package offer as well in the agency. So we'll put the form down below to complete, and we'll be in touch there. And also, I really need some creative strategists right now. So if there's any creative strategists listening to this, hit me up, because yeah, we're looking to expand the
we're
team.
hiring.
Yeah. Cool. See you on the next one.